secretaries exist in law or not, as a fate of 50 presidential appointees hangs in the balance. Busia Senator Okia Omtata vows to file contempt proceedings against the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority for violating a court order suspending the Finance Act 2023. Also, the 2023 Kenya Demographic and Health Survey set to be released by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics in collaboration with the Ministry of Health and other stakeholders. And court is set to convene a joint hearing on the Finance Act 2023 after it was suspended following a case filed by Busia Senator Okia Omtata. Those are some of the stories we are following up for you, but currently around 80% of global energy and 66% of electrical generation are supplied from fossil fuels, contributing approximately 60% of the greenhouse gas emissions responsible for climate change. A transition to cleaner forms of energy has already begun in many countries, but despite the recent fast rate of technological innovation and the cost reduction, renewable energy and energy efficiency technologies must still compete with highly subsidized carbon energy technologies. But why is this so? To help us unpack all this in studio, we are joined by our special guest this morning, Professor Otemo Micheka, who is currently the chair of the National Research Fund and the CEO of the Kenya Climate Innovation Center. That's Joseph Murabula. Gentlemen, once again, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Purity.
So today we talk about renewable energy. Right. And the president has, defended the government for lifting the ban on logging. We know why, Professor, why logging was banned in the country back in 2018. And experts like you say that it really contributed to the increasing the forest cover of the country. The president says that his government hopes to plant at least 15 billion trees. But again, like many Kenyans are asking, isn't this double speech from the president?
Thank you very much indeed, Purity, and I'd like to greet the Kenyans watching this program. The question that you are actually putting in place, that His Excellency lifted the moratorium on the forestation and said the older the trees they become, they should be removed to allow for the young ones to be developed. And I'd like to give just really my own personal opinion. I do really see note the reason why His Excellency lifted the moratorium. I understand why some of the trees that were left several years are rotting in the forests and not being utilized by the timber merchants. And I do understand the reason why the moratorium was put in. But in my own personal view, His Excellency did the right thing. There is nothing wrong advising the Kenyans to utilize the otherwise rotting, wasting away timber that would have been used to really uplift even the cost of living. The point that he stressed, and I was happy to hear that stressed, that because of the indiscipline, because people now would utilize that uplifting to abuse the uplifting, it is the reason why he emphasized that we should actually go ahead and do selective timber collection. So my view is this: we tell the Kenyans who are collecting those material, those timber from the forest, to be completely, and to understand completely that they must get the rightful old aging trees and not go in for the younger ones after exploiting the ones that are already mature.
All right, and I'll get back to you, and you'll take us back to why the ban, why logging was banned in the first place before now the president comes in to say we are lifting it for the reasons that you have highlighted. Joseph, what's your take on the lifting of ban on logging in the country?
Yeah, I think, thanks, Purity. Taking on from where Prof has left off, I think we know a couple of things. One, that the constitution of this country requires us to progressively increase our forest cover to about 10%. of the country's landmass. That's one. Secondly, and for those of us who work in the climate change space, we know that we have committed to having an 100% transition to renewable energy by 2030 and 100% clean cooking by 2028. So I'm tempted to think that the president's action is then informed by looking at all these things. It's not an isolated endeavor. He didn't just wake up and say, now from now on there's no logging. He looked at the current policy, what's provided by the constitution. He looked at the policy of the current government to plant 1.5 billion, or is it 1.5 or 15 billion? 15 billion trees in the next 5 years or so. And then he looked at what the current policy to ban logging is doing as against all this. So I would want to believe that it's not one of those things that the president just stood up and said, look, from now on we have lifted the ban on logging. But I would want to believe that he looked at all these things in context, and therefore he made the decision that he thinks is in the best interest of the country, given the policies that we have. At least I want to believe that that is the route that was taken.
And Prof, before the ban on logging in 2018, we saw that most of the people, how like the trees were being utilized, into timber and then charcoal burning, which of course affects the climate change. So with the lifting of the burning, and you said that the trees were rotting in the forest, which is not a good thing, But as an expert, how would you advise the government moving forward? Because probably a Kenyan heard the president saying that yes, we support the lifting, and they are now in the forest cutting down trees and ready to prepare charcoal. So what's your advice on how the steps to lifting the ban on the logging should be undertaken moving forward, and how these trees should be utilized?
I think my view is this, very clear, and this really comes on discipline. He didn't say charcoal. I didn't hear him say charcoal. He only said timber. And timber would be utilized for furniture, which we now, instead of importing, we can actually use that timber for making our own furniture. The reason that was banned is because there was indiscipline. There is a word called, you just be told, do this, and you go beyond an inch. You are told, do A, B, C, D. In a short while, you run all over the place and start reducing any other material that looks green. The real reason is stressed is this, and I like it to be understood very clearly. If we were disciplined and followed what we were told, we couldn't be having a lot of these problems. We could say, as long as the tree is mature, experts are there following that, foresters are there, we cull the older ones. Every country developed does that. The only problem, and I think he stressed it very clearly, the president said, and he knows it, is that persons once told to do X, Y, Z, they turn around and they utilize that lift to cut even smaller, younger vegetation called under trees. And then they end up going doing charcoal. He didn't say that. You have actually said it today. It is the trees that are really mature, old, to be utilized for timber and avoid importation of material from other countries, China, etc. And they utilize the young carpenters to do beautiful furniture that we make here and are sold in town and taken back to some shops and sold at exorbitant prices. So if we understood very clearly, that's how I got. We do what we are told, understand, we don't get indisciplined and go out in the forest and clear what we see. And in the process, we do 15 billion trees. I've done about, me myself, I've done about 1,000. Continuously grow them and ensure that they survive, and they will be replacing the older ones over time. The word indiscipline, corruption, gets in and destroys what is so nicely planned in place.
And it was as a result of the indiscipline and corruption that the logging was banned in the country in 2018.
I've answered that now.
What steps would you want to see in place so that we don't get back to, cutting down the trees that are not mature enough, and so end up depleting the forest cover that we already are enjoying?
And that's exactly where I was coming in. You see, the directive mostly affects government forests. They are the majority, but that's what it affects. It does not affect the private forests, because those are managed under private policies. Now, what one now expects is that the Kenya Forest Service will look at this directive and then publish guidelines that will govern trading in timber. So it will then now become very clear as to what one needs to do in order to be able to go and harvest trees from the government forest, how those trees should look like, how old they should be, and what they should be used for.
Yeah.
And then on that basis, there will be probably a permitting system. At least that's what one expects. That then you don't just turn up in a forest and decide that now forest logging has been banned, so you don't just turn up in a government forest and start cutting trees. That this will be controlled. You will get a permit from the Kenya Forest Service. It will tell you how many trees you need to cut and where, and how you need to use it for. So everything hopefully will be done under some sort of order and in a very controlled way.
Yeah. All right. And Prof, lastly, on the same, apart from economic benefits that these trees, the mature trees, of course, once cut, they can be used as timber. You mentioned that sometimes they rot in the forest, okay? So is there any dangers to that, or you just want them utilized so that they can also uplift the lives of Kenyans?
No.
Yeah.
Those that rot by accident is actually better even for the forest. They add mulch, they change the ecosystem, they change the fauna, flora in that area.
Yes.
That is quite in order. There's nothing wrong.
There's nothing wrong.
Absolutely nothing wrong. So really they should stay. It's called culling, C-U-L-L-I-N-G, culling.
Yes.
You remove the older ones for the better of the other young ones. And the only reason we just made a mistake was simply to go in and do everything possible. Timber, we have among the best timber materials in the world today, Kenya actually. The tropical forest we have, semi-tropical mega biodiversity forests we have, the Kakamegas and some of the coastal lines could be utilized beautifully and be a source of income, jobs, and the great opportunities, even export out to the other countries.
Yeah. And Joseph, you know, it's not Kenya as a country that had banned logging. In 2015, it was part of the East African countries, including Uganda and Tanzania, that had agreed to addressing the issue of illegal logging. Okay, and the word is illegal. So that means there's legal logging. So let's talk about the other countries that have taken these steps, and probably the African countries, and probably if you think that lifting the ban would support or help countries economically, but if done well, as you had earlier said.
If you look at East Africa, most of the timber actually comes from the Congo.
Yes.
And it comes from the Congo, and it comes in through Uganda. Now, so part of the reason the other countries were following suit to ban logging is basically to control the illegal trade. A lot of people went to Congo, they cut trees, they brought in because of the lack of order in Congo, and then sold here. So once you have those trees and you are caught with them, you probably don't have a permit. Your first defense is to say this has come from my own forest, or I have a permit for it. So part of it was to try and control this. So I expect that with the passage of time, because it's been 5 years since all this was done, that now at least the countries have been able to put in place some infrastructure to be able to control illegal trade. And therefore, this will be done because we still have to promote legal regional trade, including regional trade in timber. So this will be done in a controlled way, and this will be done under some form of regime that then provides benefits across the board. One, the countries themselves are able to get the taxes. The owners of the forest, be they government or private, are able to get revenue out of their labor. And then the people involved within the industry are able to get value for what they pay for. And that's what control happens. So I want to believe that this is coordinated, that the ban was coordinated, and that the lifting of the ban will also be coordinated. So hopefully we'll see the other ESC countries following suit and saying we also lift the ban after Kenya has.
Kenya has. Do you expect the same?
I do actually expect the same. Really. I expect regulations on how to do it. And I expect the foresters, the trained foresters all over the country, beautiful working persons, to be told this is what should be done. They should be actually be given guidelines on how to do the culling systematically. Other countries, we do very nice write-ups, and if that it is the write-ups we don't follow. We write, regulate, agree on them, and abuse that literature we make. So really the abuse of what we agree on is what causes this. Otherwise, we have even better information on what we should do with our forests than making even new ones. I think other countries will actually follow suit. I say the Kakamega Forest, all the beautiful coastal lines we have, the only remnants of the typical tropical forests.
Exactly.
Protect them. Let the older ones die. Change the ecosystem. Let the young ones survive. The middle ones you think can be cut over and utilized. The Kenyans should be done that beautifully without disturbing anybody. The only worst that I repeat 20 times is that people take that law for granted, and because of greed of whatever, they cut the ones that should not be cut. And I used to be in Lema, and I know what I'm talking about. The moratorium we had long time ago, even for the hotels in Masai Mara, a reduction of them was being pushed to allow for excessful hotels, for example. So when the moratorium was lifted, put hotels, no people went there. It's not as frequently done as possible. So really, if the laws were followed, His Excellency would be just absolutely right to lift it. And if it happens they're abusing it, then there will be another moratorium for another several years.
Of another ban.
Another big ban now.
All right. And we hope enough guidelines this time round will be in place to ensure that we don't again report cases of increased fossil fuel being utilized in the country, because when you ban charcoal, we will shift our conversation from renewable energy to now, depleting the ozone layer. So
NEMA comes in play, really. NEMA has those regulations. Even if you went today, pick them, they will tell you what to do. NEMA, National Environment.
The issue is enforcement. And I think that's why Prof is talking about discipline. So everybody does their job to ensure that the system works smoothly as designed.
And the country or the government is committed, as they say through the Ministry of Environment, that we are committed to transitioning to clean energy, renewable energy. But when we again heard that ban on logging is lifted, so Kenyans were asking, are we headed forward, or now we are back to, depleting the forest and again, cutting down on trees? So when, for example, we talk about use of timber and not charcoal, we are talking about renewable energy, right? Utilizing the renewable energy. So let's pick this conversation from there before we take a break on what renewable energy is and what it really entails.
Renewable energy really is the utilization of the existing material that can be used to utilized for light power, etc. We have a lot of sources of that, and my brother here is one of those that really runs a very big organization on renewable energy. In Kenya we have it. We have been utilizing what we can use, but to a limited utilization. It is there. It's expanding. Demand is getting very high on renewable energy, but the sources are actually diminishing. And he can even explain more. We just had a chat with him for a while, and I realized that what Kenya is using is much too less, and we have issues on various types of renewable energy that we have in the country. So it is not. We have not fully understood it, but I think the organizations that are doing it, which is what Joseph is one of them, they do know exactly where the problem could be. I do know the issues that come through. The only issue is that our limited education knowledge on what can be utilized to produce energy is not utilized to the limit.
Yeah, maybe there is lack of awareness among the people on the options they have. Maybe you can list for us some of the sources of renewable energy. Then after the break, we shall talk about the limitations there are, why we don't have enough.
Yeah. I mean, basically, just to take on from what Prof said, the renewable energy is called renewable for the basic reason that it is not used up during the production process. So the actual input is not consumed, and therefore the energy source is not exhausted. It more or less survives forever. In this country, the main renewable energy source at independence was hydro, which we got from water. And for until very recently, when geothermal took over, our energy mix was mostly hydro. The other renewable energy source, which again the government has promoted fairly aggressively, is solar. So we get energy from the sun. Of course, basically just convert it using cells, and then we are able to get energy. And then geothermal again is another very good renewable energy source. We I think are the leading company in terms of leading country in terms of geothermal in Africa, mostly because of what KenGen is doing. And then you would of course also recall that we now have the largest wind farm in Africa, in Turkana. So wind is another renewable energy source. We also have another renewable energy source, although not too clean, which we call biomass. Basically, what biological products, crops, exactly, that we then through landfills or other processes convert into energy. So I would say, basically, if you're talking about the renewable energy available in the country, then you're basically just talking those. You're talking hydro, you're talking solar, you're talking geothermal, you're talking biomass, you're talking wind.
And you mentioned things that are literally shocking, Prof and I, that we have the largest, for example, wind power in the country. We have also geothermal. We are the largest producer for that, but we don't seem to be enjoying what we have. So where exactly is the problem? I think you can answer that question when we return from this short commercial break. But you're watching News Center. We talk about renewable energy, the global focus. And in studio, we have Professor Ratemo Micheka, who is the current chair at the National Research Fund. I almost said Global Research Fund, but why not? Yes, and then we have Joseph Murabola, who is the CEO at the Kenya Climate Innovation Center. This conversation continues in a short while. Stay with us.